Good evening. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance for Thursday, February 15th, 2018 to order. First item on the agenda is public forum. What I would like to do during public forum, and I think it's appropriate to mention that over the last month since we last met, and in fact yesterday, another tragedy happened. There were two tragedies that occurred. One that was local and one that was in southern Florida. And I just feel it's appropriate that we provide a moment of silence for the family and friends of Ethan Song, and as well as the family and friends and all the first responders in both cases to both of those tragedies that were affected by the horrible shooting in Parkland, Florida. So a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Anything further in public forum? Item number 2, approve minutes of the regularly scheduled meeting minutes of January 15th, 2018. Any comments to those?
I have some corrections.
You have some corrections.
Yeah.
Okay.
So page 1, under receive audit report, it says in the last paragraph under number 1, should say manage, not management. Page 3, under number 5, last paragraph, second line. I don't choose what, it should say some or little, but not both.
Okay.
And then I think on page 5, under number 8, just change and to an asset test. You're
Any
just
other?
dealing with an English major, sorry.
It's okay. All corrections are important. Anybody else have any?
I had one on page 2.
Sure.
Section 3.1. It says Mr. Beatty noted a correction, but I wasn't at the meeting,
Yeah,
so
I saw that
I
too.
don't think I was able to.
I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
know who did, but it
Yeah,
wasn't me.
I recall it might have been Mr. Trotta. I don't recall, but someone did mention it. I remember that coming up, but I don't remember who it was. So whoever it was, someone noted the correction. So, but you weren't here, so thank you.
You're free of indictment.
Ken, did you have?
I had a point. I noticed that in some of the areas within the budgets where we asked for some clarifications, we did get them, and I thank Mary Jane for that.
Yes.
But I wondered whether, perhaps this is the appropriate place for it, I don't know, but under the presentation of Bloom Shapiro, the last 2 paragraphs on page 1, number 1, the point raised about implementing best practices for financial control. I wonder if we're getting a report on that tonight, or if there's been any movement in that area at all. It's not just financial, it's management, as you folks have pointed out.
Is that regarding the fraud risk management?
Yeah, and I wondered
assessment?
where you were on this.
Well, I know that there's been a meeting regarding that particular item. I was actually going to let our first selectman talk about it a little bit, because I know that's something that we are considering. I do know that one of the things that we've been calling it, or in the report, is fraud risk assessment. I think we're going to try to get rid of the fraud word if we can, because it really ends up being operations efficiencies and technology improvements. So, but I'll defer to Matt during the town presentation, because I believe you were going to talk about it, right? Okay. Just remind me. Yes, will. Yeah. Okay. I did have a couple, if no one else had any others, just very quickly. Actually, same paragraph, as Megan pointed out on page 1, final paragraph of item 1. Actually, this last sentence, they could do as little or as much of an assessment as we want, not they. I don't think we want them to control how much of an assessment they do. That would be we.
The town wants. Really,
the town wants, yeah.
The town wants would be better.
And actually, I had the same item that Jeff had. So, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
And I'll abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Okay, item number 3, correspondence, Standing Building Committee minutes. I will report that I was able to attend the entire February meeting that happened on the 6th. I'm not surprised that the meetings aren't ready, minutes aren't ready yet, because it was pretty short. I know we got January's meeting minutes. I can certainly try to entertain questions. I was not at that meeting, but I know there were a lot of follow-up items on the building committee. I did somewhere, right in front of me. I just wanted to give a quick update regarding some of those items that you're going to read about when the meeting minutes do come through. The plan and specifications for the town hall elevator and fire alarm upgrades were approved by the building committee. Community center roof replacement project, that is going out to bid, and the bids are going to be open on March 20th after being received, I believe, on February 21st. That's assuming that the building committee approved those on the 12th, which was Monday of this week. Melissa Jones roof project went to the state and are, I believe, being revised. And the electrical upgrades in Baldwin and Cox, the bids were due on that on March 6th. One item I want to bring up that you're going to read about and is under investigation right now, and I just want to be transparent and make sure everyone knows, is that the new synthetic turf field, there seems to be an issue of the joint separating. I'm sure the Board of Ed is well aware of this, superintendent, the principal. Ultimately, as far as I know, the field, we're in February, so it's not a huge issue yet, but in the spring it will be an issue that the field is now not being used or able to be used for safety reasons. We understand it's new as the town, as the Board of Ed, and is being investigated as far as why that has happened. It should be still under warranty, but you're going to read about it, and I'm sure it's going to create some discussion. Yes, thank you. So it is being investigated right now. And once that comes through, I'm sure the building committee and everybody else will hear about what the issue is and a possible solution. That's my report on what happened in February, which should address some of the things in January. So if there's any other questions on the building committee from January.
I got one for you, Mike.
Ken first, and then.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
I have a question about item 5 and item 9 and why they couldn't be folded together. 5, the Standing Building Committee is considering district-wide wiring upgrades, and in 9, we're talking about electrical upgrades at 3 school buildings. My question is, why can't this all be considered as part of one unified project and addressed as such?
If I'm not mistaken, they may be under different bond questions, that's why. That's the district-wide improvements have been out there actually for quite a while. I don't remember which bonds each one fell under, but that's maybe that's certainly a question I could ask.
Because there is an overlap. There must be an overlap in there in the two projects.
There's some overlap, yes. That's something we could look into.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
I might venture a guess on that. I think the low voltage wiring probably doesn't require an electrician, a licensed electrician. Not positive though.
Okay, that could be the case, but now we're
Right.
all of us we're
Kinda
both speculating, so
Speculating.
we should get an answer. Yeah.
I was curious if you knew if the district-wide wiring for the network wiring project goes across school properties and town properties. I don't know the scope of the project, and I was wondering that term district-wide.
District-wide would just be the schools.
It's just the schools?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, building committee? Pension committee? Always a good read. I didn't have anything. Anybody?
No,
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. Any other correspondence? There may be some correspondence, right? Okay.
So, on February 5th, I got an email on behalf of the Board of Finance from a Guilford resident who holds some Guilford bonds. And he just had a concern because he had gotten an email from Fidelity saying that we had failed to file a financial document.
The town of Guilford failed to.
Right.
Okay.
But after working with Mary Jane and Bill Lindsay, we didn't fail to file. What happened was there was a calculation error in the data, and going back to 2012. So Bill Lindsay and Mary Jane worked on this. They corrected the data all the way back to 2012, including the calculation error. So when we filed, we had to check that status, that in the past we had failed to file properly in order to correct the data going forward. So he is all set. He was happy with that answer. So if it does come up, it's not that we failed to file, it's just we had to go back and correct a calculation in the data.
Great.
So he's happy.
Mary
Yeah.
Jane, go ahead.
I'd just like to add that there was no error
Right.
in the documents. All of the data was there, but the disclosure asked for a certain type of formula that we weren't showing in one of our spreadsheets. So when I spoke to Bill Lindsay, I chose to go back to err on the side of caution to be sure that our disclosures were 100% correct. So we went back and we corrected each of those years to be sure that if somebody were to look now, that information is there, and moving forward, that information will be in our CAFRs going forward.
Great. Thank
And
you.
I think Bill is going to send a letter to the Board of Finance, he said, right?
That was the note that we sent to you. I can certainly read it.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
I think he said he was going to send one to the Board of Finance for the future.
Oh, maybe for the future.
Yeah.
I thought that the correspondence he sent in the email would probably be appropriate. But what
I
we should do at this
thought so
point,
too.
now that we brought it up in correspondence, we should share that with the entire Board of Finance so they know. We just didn't, I definitely wanted to bring it up because I didn't know whether or not how many other Guilford bondholders there are. And if there's anybody else, they may be watching this meeting saying, yeah, I got the same thing. Why is that? Why did they fail to file? That wasn't the case at all. So,
Right.
And I would like to add one side note that Mary Jane told me, which was that when Bill Lindsay was approached on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he said this is the first time he's ever received that question with all of the bonds that are held over the period of time. So he was surprised that he had received that when this was something that happened a while ago. So thank you for that, Mary Jane. I know you did a lot of work behind the scenes, so thank you. Any other correspondence? Okay, item 4. Review and accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for January 2018. Linda and Bill.
Mr. Kazin actually was the reviewer, but he is working on our audio-visual presentation, so I'll cover for him.
You're pinch hitting.
For the moment, yes.
You were going to be here anyway, so we're now.
And Mr. Ailes, I would like to take the opportunity to echo really what you said starting the meeting. This has been a difficult couple of weeks for everybody in town, not the least of whom are people involved in the public education world and also obviously the public safety aspect of town services. I think that what happened here, the way this community pulled together, the way our public school staff and administration and students and parents pulled together, I think really was in a face of a very, very tragic and difficult situation. I think that really helped to reveal what is best about this town. This was something that certainly we hope would never happen here, but did, and the way that the school staff and students and faculty and administration responded to it was exemplary. It was the best we could have hoped for. So I'm grateful. On behalf of the Board of Education, I just want to thank the First Selectman's Office, Youth and Family Services, and obviously the Police Department and first responders.
Thank you.
In terms of the expenditures for the month, this is really a rather uncomplicated report. The expenditures for the month of January were $4,785,231.93. We are basically on track. We've had to do a little bit of relatively small transfers between accounts, mostly related to just cash flow issues with the excess cost grant coming in later, hopefully later this month, from the state on the excess cost for special education outplacements. I think we can answer any questions as to any individual warrants. The only other item I would like to highlight is that we did, at our last meeting, award a new bus contract. As you know, we went out to bid, as we're required to, and as is our practice, for a new 5-year contract. There were 7 companies that actually attended the bid meeting. Only 2 of them wound up submitting bids, and we think that that's not anything that was related to our bid package, because it's just it's a bid package. It's, you know, the job is to get kids to school and pick them up at their house. It's not that complicated. So it's not something that we did, but it appears that the market is just not very good right now for buyers of public school transportation, and there are troubles with hiring drivers at existing rates. There are troubles with the capital that's needed to invest in equipment. So in any event, long story short, we only got 2 bids, and both of the bids were, at least from this current 17-18 year to 18-19, both of them were a substantial increase. Nobody was surprised by that because of our history with our current vendor. We were quite clear that they were below market because they wanted to get a foothold in this area, and we allowed them to get a foothold in this area. They were. I think from looking at what other towns were paying, we knew that we were going to get an increase, and the increase for the first year under either of the 2 bids is approximately 20%. But it really is just a market correction, we believe. The 2 bids then thereafter, the current vendor is STA, Student Transportation of America. Their bid was a total of about $500,000 higher over the 5 years than the other company, which is Specialty Transportation. We went back to STA and Specialty and asked to, as our bid package allows, we asked them to reconsider their numbers, and STA did come in with a little lower number. Specialty, as the lower bidder, declined to bid against themselves and maintained the number that they were at. The STA bid was still approximately $350,000 in excess of the Specialty Transportation bid. And Specialty promises us that they will invest in all new equipment, that they will invest in all new 2018 buses if they were awarded the contract. So on Monday, the Board of Education voted unanimously to go with the low bidder. And so as of the fall of 2018, our vendor will be Specialty Transportation.
Was there any difference between Specialty and STA that would account for that variance, other than that was just their...
Same number of buses, same everything. The product, the service that we're asking them to provide was identical. So we haven't been unhappy with STA. Sure. STA's done a good job, but it's we did a lot of background checking on Specialty. They do Avon's service, and we do have some connections in Avon. Our assistant superintendent was the principal at Avon High School and has very good connections there, and I think we're quite confident that they would have told him if they were dissatisfied. They also do Hartford's transportation, and I think the same thing. They're trying to get into this end of the state a little bit. So between the low price and the new equipment, it really wasn't that close a call.
Sure. So what's the percentage of increase?
In the first year, 20% approximately, and each year thereafter, 2%. So we think it's compared to what other towns are paying, it's not that hard to compare what the bus contracts are for, because you can price them out per bus per day. And so we know that we're very, very close to what comparable towns are paying for transportation services.
The report is that they have relative stability on their drivers and their driving crew.
With relative being the defining word, sure. It's a very tricky market, the school bus driving market. And it's actually one thing that we found when we were talking about maybe trying to go to 2 waves of buses. to try to enable later start times, that was going to have a very big impact on the ability to hire drivers, because it would not be easy to hire somebody for 3 hours in the morning, take a 4-hour break, and then 3 hours in the afternoon. It's just not a very attractive job. And so right now it can be a full-time job, but and I think that's probably part of what the increase in the first year is going to be, is that there's going to be salary changes for the drivers, I expect. But as independent, the bus service is a kind of paradigm independent contractor situation. We do not tell them how much to pay the drivers. We do not supervise the drivers. We do not impose rules on the drivers. They are independent contractors. They're responsible for, the company is responsible for managing them. The company is responsible if one of them makes a mistake. So, and so that's why we don't get into the management of the drivers. One reason why we don't.
I know we're kind of delving a little bit into probably what you're going to be talking about later, but so when we were meeting, there was approximately a $300,000 increase that was going to be was talked about, and you just said there was 20% increase. So that hasn't changed from.
That's correct.
It's still the 20% increase.
Correct.
Because I believe you were all talking about. I guess you went back to them and you were hoping for, a little bit of a reduction. The point is, what you just said is that the low bidder didn't want to bid against themselves, so they didn't lower themselves. So the low bid is that 20% number.
Correct, and that is also, I should say, the number that we put into the budget that the Board of Education approved. So this is the money that we're talking about for the new contract is not in addition to the money that we've brought that we've sought in our draft budget or proposed budget.
Did they reduce the amount of the following 4 years, or was that?
No, that was always the way it was.
It was always 2%?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we have it on our notes as 3.
Okay, no, just because the notes say 3, but it could have just been, this was preliminary, this was when we met jointly.
Well, STA was proposing 3.
Oh, that's what it was.
Right.
Okay. Okay. That's probably what was being referred to. All right. I guess the floor is open up for questions, so. Ken? Go ahead.
I had a question about tuition.
Yes.
I know there's another factor there. In Linda's letter, which I find very useful, says that there will be a transfer required, and you say that's only because of the excess cost grant, the delay in receiving the excess cost grant. Yet, I think, am I correct?
Well, it's not delayed. It doesn't come until the end of February.
Okay.
So that's the standard schedule for it.
But if you look at the private tuition part of the chart you provided, private tuition actually goes up quite a bit. The budget called for private tuition at $1.7 million, and your projections as of this week are 2.2.
We wouldn't need to do a budget transfer, though, because that wouldn't be until the end of the budget year. The only reason we need to do a budget transfer is because if we've got expenses pending that are in excess of what we expected were going to be our total expenses for the year, but that doesn't count the ECS grant because that isn't here yet.
The 2.19.
It's just a timing. It's a timing issue. Having said that, we are likely to be above for private school outplacements for the year. The primary reason being we expected to have 21 outplacements and we have 27.
Right.
Now, there have been some savings in other places, but that's...
So where's the transfer coming from?
Teacher salaries, or it's not teacher salaries in general. And it's only a $75,000 transfer. It's not, we're going to wait to see what happens at the end of the year. We've been actually very conservative in the way we budgeted the ECS grant. I think we budgeted it at 70% of what we are entitled to under the law. And in fact, the ECS grants have been a little higher historically, so we're hopeful that that's going to make up some of it.
Higher than the 70%.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
There are no other school districts involved in providing students to Guilford.
I think it's the other way around right now. We have a couple of people from out of town that are paying fees to Guilford.
$76,000.
Yes,
Right.
just those two.
The only two items that I think I've been asking about the last couple months had to do with site improvements under capital and building, upkeep of buildings and grounds, which are both in the 90s in terms of percentage. I do see upkeep of buildings and grounds is about 300,000 encumbered, so there's still a lot of encumbered out there, but that's to be expected. And then site improvements, I think it was addressed last month that there's not much encumbered, most of it's all spent. And that was due to a couple of unexpected, right?
Mostly the Adams project.
The Adams project.
And some things that were done over the start of the summer, start of the fiscal year.
Yeah. Those are the only two that I see that are big numbers that are trending higher, but
They're
it was
manageable.
They're manageable, and they were like that last month. so.
Right.
Right. Any other questions for the Board of Ed?
Warrants?
Warrants.
I have a question on page 3, just never, I don't think I ever saw this before. Executive coaching, what is that? It's an invoice paid to Connecticut Center for School Change, about $2,500.
It's a professional development for building principal. So it's a professional development we're doing for principal.
Although we've been spared a lot of snow, I see on page 7, we paid over $13,000 for district snow removal. How much of this is done internally and how much of it is done with an outside contractor?
The outside contractor does Guilford High School only. Everything else is done in-house.
So this is all for Guilford High School?
Yes.
Then so far we've been spared.
What was the budget for that? What did we budget for? Knock on wood.
Snow removal? I don't know. It was probably more than $13,000.
I'm just wondering how much of the
Yes.
budget for that, for the high school.
My recollection is, shouldn't,
80,000.
80?
80.
80, okay.
There's a transfer.
all right, take it easy, all right? You know, it's the middle of February.
Yeah.
There's always
Yes.
March 25th.
We have one day that approaches 60 and we're all thinking spring's here, right? Okay.
Can't we bottle?
Yeah, right. Okay, any other questions for the Board of Education?
So,
Oh,
Warren-
sorry, Veronica, then,
On page 6 of the warrants, Guilford High School equipment repairs for Hilliard Rovic. What is that for? There's like a whole list of them.
includes lakes too, a couple things at lakes. And Baldwin.
One was at Baldwin, but the rest were all Guilford High School. Oh, yeah, 2 at Lakes. Yeah.
Don't remember exactly what those were for. I will find out and get back to you.
Yep.
Yes, you are. Go ahead, John.
Saw a warrant on page 8 for Natchok Hospital, is that right? For tuition? Is that special ed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
They have school programs that they run under the Natchog Hospital name.
Okay. Thought we were sending them to medical school already.
No.
Going back to the report.
Yeah, sure.
Textbooks seem to be down. Is that just timing or?
A little bit of timing, a little bit of what's been requested, a little bit of, we're finding as we are going more wireless that some classes are depending more on technology.
Right. So the
Not
Google,
surprising.
the Google Chrome and the software-based books are.
It's not uncommon for us to order the books at the end of the fiscal year to have them in for the following year. So as they're looking at and deciding which books throughout this year, we know we're going to buy a certain book. We order them at the end of the year.
Okay.
So I would expect to see that be spent
Okay.
somewhat as we get.
It just struck me
further
because it
towards
was
the year.
substantially lower than where it was at this point last year. Great.
Actually, I saw textbooks was down and computer software was up. So,
Yeah,
Kinda goes
The
to what you
software you
said.
needed at the beginning of the year, the
Well,
textbooks, maybe, because by the time the budget's approved July 1, it's too late to order textbooks.
Yeah, that's true.
The software increase is actually because the Munis financial software is now billed annually, where in the past it was billed quarterly.
I see.
But most software we pay at the beginning of the year because it's the annual license. So that isn't uncommon to see that get spent a lot in the beginning.
Great, thank you.
I got another question on warrants. I was noticing some phone reimbursements for admins at the schools. Do we reimburse by calls for school business, or is it for the entire phone service?
No, they can get reimbursed up to $50 a month for their phone because they are required to have it so that they can be contacted at any time that they're needed.
Okay, I saw one for like 164, so it's a little higher than the
Depends.
50.
Yes, that might be Dr. Freeman's reimbursement. So his phone is obviously used differently than an administrator just being on call. So his is a little bit more.
Okay, is it fully reimbursed for all the service, or do they do it by call?
My recollection, it's still entire service by
Service, yes.
contract. That
Yes,
was something that,
it's
it's certainly not by call.
no.
Whether it's a proportion of his contract or the complete contract, I think it's the complete contract.
Yes, I think it's the full charge for his phone,
Okay, thanks.
his monthly bill.
Could we get some, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Could we get some kind of general description on page 9, Pediatric Services of America? There's privacy issues and so forth. What I see is just a string of numbers.
Yes, you see a string of numbers because the vendor asks to have the claim numbers put in the description so that they know which ones we are paying. It is for nursing services for a student.
Special ed.
Specialized nursing services.
Special ed, nursing service for a special education student, required by an IEP.
Veronica?
On page 2, there's a expense for lease and cameras for almost $2,900 to Amazon. Is that a...
So the lease reference isn't that we are leasing the equipment, it's that it's purchased under the technology lease. So it's a reference for us so that we know which items, when technology department buys things, are applicable under the lease. So we have a $500,000 technology lease to buy equipment for, and it just allows us to buy more equipment in 1 year, and we spread out the payments over the 5 years.
But to Amazon?
We're not leasing the equipment, we buy it outright. It's just a reference for us that it was purchased through the technology lease funds. So we buy the equipment, we own it. We submit the proof of purchase to the leasing company, they reimburse us the money, and then we pay back the lease over 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
I saw a couple of warrants too for emergency service for HVAC at Jones and Baldwin. Was that when we had that very cold spell back in December and we had problems?
We've had ongoing
It could
issues.
be, but it could be something else too. The Baldwin and Jones HVAC are in need of substantial attention.
Those are the ones.
Those are the ones on the
Those are
bonding.
the ones,
bonding
yes.
request.
Yeah, and-
They're the original equipment.
It's
to
original
the-
equipment, and I'm gonna tell you the same thing I tell you every year. If we're gonna stay in our buildings without building anything new, we have to take care of them, and those need HVAC work. So,
And we have not had an in-house HVAC person for a while. He was out due to an injury. He is back to work now at the end of January.
That was going to be my question.
Right.
So,
So hopefully the number of emergency
sees,
calls will
yes,
go down.
yes, hopefully
Great.
the number will go down, and we'll be able to take care of a lot more in-house.
I assume will you be talking about that a little bit tonight, the presentation about bonded questions, or that come?
we can, it would probably be a little later, but
Yeah.
we can certainly give you some information.
Okay, yeah. Just for preparatory purposes.
Right.
We got material on that.
One question, does the HVAC service, the person on staff, does that include, I see another item for boilers. Does he work on the boilers as well, or is that a separate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We do have a contract with Air Dynamics. They do the annual cleaning and tuning and maintenance of the boilers. So there was a charge on here for, I believe, it's $6,800, $6,500,
$6,500.
$6,500. It was bid out. We awarded them, I think, a 3-year agreement for them to come in and do this specific cleaning and tuning that is kind of little bit more involved than having our guy do, our in-house person do it. So that was one of the charges that was on here.
Great, thank you.
Anything else we want to grill the Board of Ed with? Okay. With that being said, do I hear a motion to accept and the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for January 2018, $4,785,231.93.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Okay. Item 5, review and approve report of expenditures for town government for January 2018. Mary Jane's already here. The floor is yours. Revenues? Assuming? Revenues, I'm assuming?
Sure.
Sure.
As of the end of January, we are 94.8% collected overall. On the local revenue side, the town clerk is close to the 58% target at 50%, 57%, but is lower than we were last year at 74.7%. I just wanted to note that this is due to increasing her budget this year, so it's an anomaly looking at the two together. But this year's budget is better projecting where we should be at this time, so clearly we have budgeted that one properly this year. Tax collection continues to be strong. We're at 97.4%. Let's see, planning and zoning is another area where they the revenue budget they increased their revenue budget projection to anticipate some projected commercial and multifamily housing applications. And the timing of those projects have them behind at the moment. Those have not come forward, so just want to make note of that.
Are they stalled? Are they?
No, this just
forward?
haven't, they're moving forward, yes. I just want to note that we did receive 50% of our expected ECS grant revenue, not necessarily 50% of our budget, but 50% of what we're expected to get. So, and on top of that, all of our state revenue is in line at this point to what we are expecting to receive.
That's good.
So.
There was some communication on fire and the revenue on fire that
And it's lower.
it's basically, it's a lower percentage because there was an increase in their budget, correct?
Correct.
So it's the same reason as the town clerk.
Right, I did speak to the chief,
Yeah.
like us, and he did not have any specific item to point that to, other than the Medicare is not reimbursing as much because of some change in how they're paying. So, but it really shouldn't have too much effect on our revenue because we're not paying as much either. So,
It's a percentage.
yeah, it's a percentage.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yes.
You said the state revenue is where you think it should be, but it seemed like the other state revenue line was pretty low, at 31% collected compared to 77% for last year. I thought
Well,
maybe...
again, you have to remember that we're not bringing in all that we're budgeted for. But we have received all of the grant money that I would expect at this time in the fiscal year,
Okay.
based on the actual amount that we're expecting to receive.
So is our amount that we're expecting is wrong here in our budget, or?
Correct. If you
because of the
remember, I
cost?
reported
Yep.
the changes to the budget from the time that it was approved to the time that the state legislator and the governor made some changes. So correct, we're not bringing in all that we've budgeted for.
What was that amount again? It was, do you know?
It was about 200,000,
About
give or
yeah.
take. I mean, I can provide those exact numbers again.
Somehow I remember like 270 or something.
Could be, yeah.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I don't remember. So, but that's
So the point is, we got hit less than
Mr. Chairman?
what we had budgeted.
I think the number's
Yeah.
187,000.
187.
187?
And it was close to 200. So.
Okay, good, thank you.
Question about revenue?
Sure, go ahead.
Where do you expect it to go if it's at 97.5 right now?
Tax collection. Hard to tell. We've done a very good job this year of bringing in prior year tax collections. That number is high. As those come in, there's less and less to collect. So that's where we're seeing the numbers increase. But I wouldn't expect it to be too much higher through the end of the year.
Anything else in revenues? Okay. Expenditures.
On the expenditure side, town government is at 67% through the year, and it's only slightly higher than where we were at this time last year, 66.5%. The only item I'd like to note is the reval account, you'll notice, is over by 6,000. I do anticipate it going over by as much as 35,000 based on the contract total, but this overage will be covered by money we have set aside in a reserve fund specifically for this purpose, and you'll see in the budget for next year that we do have an amount that we're putting in to start building that reserve back up for the next reval. So we put a little bit away every year, and then when the contract comes due, we take it from the reserve, so we will do that at year end. All of the other lines seem to be doing well, unless you have any questions.
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead.
I have a question on engineering. It's basically on the road maintenance for summer and winter, with a good portion of the year left, and even considering what's been encumbered, the percentage used for summer, and we will have a couple of summer months in this year, that's expended over 95%, and the winter is about 72%, and this is at 58% of the year.
Right, so we do have significant dollars encumbered for that, which will carry us through the next few months as we move forward. I don't know of any specific projects. I mean, I could check with engineering at this point, but as you can see, there is 16,000 encumbered in summer and another 52 encumbered in winter. So,
Could you just describe what are the items that are in the encumbrances currently?
I'd have to look that up. I don't know exactly what it's in purchase orders at this point.
Okay.
Materials.
That's what I was thinking. Was it
It's
salt,
mostly
sand?
well,
salt,
yeah, for winter that's
asphalt,
salt and sand.
yeah,
But on
coal
the
patch.
summer side is probably with Tilcon, contracts with Tilcon.
Right. Okay.
The point is, though, we're not over. We're well funded in
Correct.
those areas.
Anything else on expenditures? If not, we can move to warrants.
Move to warrants.
See if I had any.
You have reval at 32.7. How much more is left to pay for reval?
I don't have an exact figure to tell you. We are obviously at the end of our evaluation. We do have meetings that will be held with people that come forward to question their new assessments. And I believe there's a part of the contract that uploads the information to our website or updates the website of some sort. But as I said, I think it would probably be about 40,000
Total?
Total, over 45 to 50,000 over that amount.
Over that amount?
Over what we've budgeted this year. So we're over already by 6. I had estimated another 35.
That's another.
At least.
We originally budgeted
The
25?
contract's the contract is 122,000. 222,000.
So we'll be over by about 40 or... We'll be over by...
We won't be over on the contract. We will be over on our budgeted amount this year because we have money in a reserve.
Question on the special fund, weekly, just third item down. The Baldwin windows and doors, it's listed on the account description as prior year encumbrance. Just curious what that,
Because we have a purchase order out with the contractor.
Right.
And that, the special funds, the money carries over, so there's a purchase order still outstanding.
Still outstanding.
It-
Okay.
In the Munis software, it closes out to prior year encumbrances. That's,
okay.
but it's really just an outstanding purchase order for that
That's all it
work.
is, okay. I just saw prior year and that caught my attention because I know it's an open project and being worked on, so.
Correct. It's just the way Munis handles it.
Okay, it's a Munis thing, okay.
I'm curious about the Marina Commission electricity, and I was just curious, the Marina Commission pays you back, right, for the electricity, or?
The marina has its own fund,
Yep.
so that's where these funds are being paid from.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. I thought the check went out and then they reimbursed it, got it.
Nope, it would come directly from their fund.
I have a general question. On our copier leases, town copier leases, does that include maintenance and toners and things like that?
Yes, some of the copiers we do pay overage fees.
Yeah.
There's a certain
Yeah,
certain
you
amount
go
of
over a
copies
certain
and we have
amount.
overage fees, but otherwise everything is included.
Including toners and stuff?
Mhm.
So then why are we
Some-
purchasing toners?
Some of our larger copiers are not. Some of our, I shouldn't say larger, specialty copiers do not include the toner.
Okay.
Just curious about, under special fund, we have a $15,500 item titled ambulance replacement. Ambulance replacement in a special fund?
Yeah, yes. So we've got this is set aside in our capital fund. So it's the stretcher that we've purchased for it from our capital funds. The bonded, I don't know if it's bonded capital or regular it's got to be the bonded capital fund when we purchased the ambulance, and this is the money left over to purchase the stretcher.
Anything else on warrants? Medical? Still trending
Well, we are
lower.
We are trending lower, but I want you to look at last year's expenditures.
Yeah.
And you'll see that as the employees who are in the HSA start to meet their deductibles, the amount goes up. So you'll see last year, after March, it looks
This
like
may-
there's a
this may be
significant...
it.
Yes, they do. It does start to
Right.
go up at that point. So we have to keep that in mind, that the trend will probably not continue in this way. I do want to draw your attention to the catastrophic claims. As you can see, between November and December, our claims have gone down from 233 to 218, which is the amount that is covered for us. I do have a question outstanding with Anthem. Typically, we don't see our claims go down. Every once in a while, that might happen if there is a dispute of a claim, and it could fluctuate a little. This is overall, one particular claim was a significant drop, so we are investigating that. There are a number of reasons that could happen, but we are trying to just zero in on what that is so that we can report that. But typically, we will not see a reduction in that line item, but we have for that month. At the end of the year, we are still estimating a $4 million fund balance. Those numbers do take into account, increasing our claims over the next few months. So depending on how that goes, that number could be, a pretty good number at this point. So, unless you have any other specific questions.
When do you have to decide about the next year's ISL premium and what kind of claim level we want to fall into?
We've already done that. It is part of our budget presentation that we've put in. We do meet with Milliman and our advisors for this, and we go over all the numbers. We are tracking high again for next year. It doesn't quite look like it from the numbers, but that's what we are anticipating. So there is an increase for next year. We are continuing to look at that, and as you work your way through the budget, we will be having additional conversations. I know the Board of Ed is having similar conversations. We both call them to see if we can adjust our numbers, and certainly that is one that we'll be looking at.
So for now, we'll stay at the 150,000 for the catastrophic?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We have not decided to change that at this point.
Okay, and I'm sorry, is there still time? I just got a little confused in their answer.
For that.
To change that?
To change that, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure. We had chosen not to pursue looking at that at this point.
Understood.
The only thing I was going to note is that in between the Board of Education, I know, and the town, there's an understanding of the fund balance right now of $4 million and how that might be able to, in the future, be used. But I know that's, how that's going to be, because it's a substantial amount. But we also have to be conservative, make sure that we're not in a position later on that we get hurt because we pull something out of it. But
correct. As I've.
But I know that's going to be maybe part of the presentation tonight, or it's definitely going to be part of the discussions over the next few weeks.
And as I've stated in the past, it's my opinion that we keep at least 2 months of claims.
Right.
So not to draw that fund down to zero.
Oh, yeah, no. Just
want to make sure I keep getting that out there.
Right. Understood. Okay. Anything else on medical benefits? Building permits. I know building permits actually falls under committee reports on our iPads, but I did notice that we're almost where we were last year for the full year after 7 months. So, on single family residences, I should say. Okay. Anything else from Mary Jane? If not, then I'd like to have a motion to approve the reported expenditures for town government for January 2018 of $1,933,032.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Okay. Now to the part you've all been waiting for. Item number 6. Receive a proposed Board of Education budget for fiscal year 2018-19. Chairman Bloss.
Welcome back.
Let me just start off by saying Dr. Freeman, of course, would like to be here. He is a director of the American Association of School Administrators, and he is at a board of directors meeting of that entity, that group in Washington today, and so he sends his regrets, but is confident that we can at least get through tonight without his input, but he will be here for the hearings moving on. So I think Dr. Freeman would, if he were here, would say that our budget reflects the priorities that we have as a community and the priorities that we have as a district for education. The vision that we are operating under is a familiar one to this board. It's a familiar one to the Guilford community. It is a vision that tries to have expert instruction in every classroom, small classes, high expectations, outstanding leadership, and in the professional learning community model. I do also want to mention, though, that I think that it's important that while the schools operate independently and try to deliver educational services on a student-by-student basis, really without the support of the community, none of this would be possible. The expectations are set by the community. The standards are set by the community, and so we're trying to really meet the community expectations with what we do, and specifically that we don't get a second chance to educate a child, and we try to take that into account, and we try to take that very seriously. These are our district priorities for this year. They, I think, are going to be familiar to most of you, and we are going to try to. We're considering amending some of these priorities, but they are not controversial. They are what have guided us really for the past several years. These are our budget assumptions, and if it has never been clearer that providing a safe and healthy school environment is one of our primary functions, it really ought to be. That is something that we have to do, and we're confident that we are doing what we can reasonably in that respect. But the whole point of what we are doing in the buildings, in the 7 buildings that we have, is to maintain the focus on instruction and learning, and that is what it's about. The way we're trying to do that this year in this budget is to maintain the support STEM, science, technology, engineering and mathematics, strengthening the professional learning community structure, and also work toward mastering the high leverage practices. And we can talk a little bit more about what that means later. We want to improve opportunities for all students. We're continuing with the International Baccalaureate program at the high school. We're continuing with programs in the elementary and middle schools to really, for example, advanced math classes in the middle schools that are going to really create opportunities for all of our students to try to make sure that they meet their full potential. And we're trying to be creative in the way we use staff and the way we are using resources, but also not only to further student learning, but to try to meet some of the state mandates that we are obligated to do.
And one of the things I'll just add on to what Mr. Bloss had said is, if Dr. Freeman were here tonight, I know that he would say that something he said to this group in the past and to the community, that he never wants to offer a status quo budget. He wants to move forward in the work that we've done through the years that we've been in district, and you're seeing the things listed in the last 2 slides that are in alignment to initiatives that not only begun years ago, but have been continued on and built upon through the years.
So this is an important slide, and it's a little bit of an anomalous slide for some of our neighboring communities. Our enrollment has been effectively, basically flat for the last 4 years, and it continues to look like that this year. We are predicting a small drop at the high school for the first time in several years. And when I say small, 30 children across 4 grades is small. That does not allow us to do anything different in terms of staffing, because we do have 4 grades, and that's an average of 7 or 8 children per grade. That just doesn't allow us to do anything differently. Now, the 5-person increase at Adams that we're predicting, that also doesn't require us to do anything. The anticipated drop at Baldwin of 44, getting closer, but probably not, because again, that's over 2 grades, and so that's I think there are a total of, I think it's in the area of 30 sections at Baldwin. So that just doesn't really enable us to do very much. And then K4 is basically flat. And interesting, pre-K is predicted to be up a little bit. So the total enrollment decline that we're anticipating is 72. Again, that really spread out over 13 grade levels. That really just doesn't allow us to do very much at all in terms of staffing in itself. Now, there are going to be a couple of changes. We're proposing adding a teacher at one of the elementary schools, and we're probably going to remove a teacher at one of the elementary schools just based on enrollment. So that's when I said we were going to try to be creative in some of these areas. That's one thing that we're talking about. We're trying to shift staff around to address and meet enrollment increases and enrollment declines. The next slide shows what we were predicting. This is our actual enrollment, as you can see. And again, 3290, we're guessing. We're predicting. I guess it's better than a guess, but it's a prediction. It could be 3320. It could be 3340. It could be 3280. But the important number is this one, the 3112. Remember, we spent a lot of money a few years ago to have an assessment for what our demographic growth was going to be in town. And as you probably know, there are lots of towns just like Guilford that are facing very substantial enrollment declines. This is where 3100 is where we were predicted to be. Now, that would have led, had it panned out that way, it turned to happen, that would have led to some much more substantial staffing reductions. But the fact is, the enrollment just hasn't declined here the way it has in other communities and the way it was predicted here. So Dr. Freeman proposed to us a budget of $59,747,175. Actually, this is our number. This is after we reduced Dr. Freeman's budget by approximately $400,000, I believe. So what we are requesting of this board is an increase of just over $1 million and a percentage increase of about 1.87%. This is what our increases at the Board of Education have looked like over the past several years. Counting this budget, the increases would be, the requested increases would be under a total of, less than 4% over the last 3 years put together. So Dr. Freeman uses the word efficiencies. I would rather call them savings. We believe that we are going to be able to restructure some of the full-time equivalents. We're going to be able to use some savings from retirements, although that's, again, a bit of an unpredictable exercise. We always get retirements, but we don't know how many, and we don't know in what areas. There are some areas where retirements are just not going to lead to any savings. For example, in shortage areas like science, like foreign language, like mathematics, we may lose a top step teacher, but we may have to hire either at top step or close to top step. It's just the way the market is right now. We do believe that there is going to be a substantially reduced number of special education outplacements in 2018-19. That's a combination of two reasons. One is that we believe that there are just going to be some children that are aging out because they are with us for until 21. There are just some people that are going to age out. But they're not being replaced as quickly as they have been historically because of the in-house special education program that we have been working on for the past 3 or 4 years. So as people age out, there's not somebody behind them. So we are very, very pleased, I think, from the point of view of both delivery of quality services and also cost savings at bringing some of the strengthen our in-house program so that we're able to create a better quality service at a less cost to the town. And then we think we're going to be able to save some money on supplies and materials. This shows where we believe our special education outplacement expenditures are going to be for 2018-19. And the blue line, I know it's a little hard to see, we can email it to you, but the blue line is the budget. The yellow line is the actual for those years. We're getting better. Now, about the time we started to go in-house for some of the special education services, had the curve continued or the line continued the way it was tracking in 2012-13, we would be literally millions of dollars higher than where we are right now. So we're very comfortable from both a quality point of view and a cost savings point of view with where the special education budget is tracking at this point. There are some changes by location. This may not mean that much, frankly, because these are going to be things like supplies and some items like that. This really doesn't have much to do with staffing. But I think the point of this is that we are trying to be conservative. We are trying to be careful with the way we are spending within buildings. So Dr. Freeman calls them cost drivers. I would call them increases. We are going to have some increases in salaries. We do believe there's going to be some increase in the medical line, although we have done very well on the medical line, as has the town. I know you just heard the report about where we are. We went to HSAs and the high deductible health plans quite a bit earlier than some other of the components of the town, and we are very happy with the way that's turned out. We think that the staff is happy with it, but it's certainly been, it's helped us get a handle on the medical costs. The transportation increase is the bus bid that we talked about earlier. That is the expected increase in the bus contract, and we do believe that there are going to be some special services increase, although not close to the degree that we've talked about in years past. The total of the increases that we are anticipating would be in the area of 1.3 million, but we did have some savings, if you will, and so the total increase that the Board of Education is proposing is just over $1 million. Now, we have recommended to and included some new positions, specifically 2 elementary music positions. That is because right now at each of the 4 elementary schools there's a half-time FTE at each of the 4 elementary schools. Guilford, by the time you get to the middle school, I think everybody understands that Guilford is exemplary in terms of the way we handle music, and certainly at both of the middle schools and the high school. However, as a matter of just statistics, we are below the state average in terms of music contact time in the elementary schools. We're also below art contact time in the elementary schools, but not by much. The difference is much greater in the elementary music area. We are also proposing an assistant coaching position for one of the newer sports. We do want to continue with the IB, the International Baccalaureate Program, and also we are very, very happy with the instructional coaching model of embedded professional development. And I'm going to in a couple of slides, I'll show you why we're happy. But I think we took a little bit of a chance on this model, and was it going to work? We are quite comfortable from talking to the principals and talking to teachers, as we do at some specific special board meetings, that the embedded professional development through instructional coaches works, period. We do also want to continue to build special education capacity. We do have some bonding requests. There are 2 that are really, and we did look at asking for a bigger request, but we are trying to time as best we can the decline in debt service for the high school that is going to peak, I think, in a couple of years and then start to decline. We're going to try to do everything we can after the peak, because we think that's just responsible and thoughtful. However, there are 2 things that we just cannot postpone. The HVAC at Baldwin is literally on its last legs, and all of us that have had to think about getting a new transmission in a car, you want to get it a month before the transmission breaks instead of a month after the transmission breaks. The problem is you don't know when the transmission is going to break. And so we're trying to do the best we can to get as much time out of both of these HVAC systems as we can, but they're both quite old. Jones goes back to the early 60s, Baldwin goes to the late 60s, and it is just not reliable equipment anymore. And you've seen some of the bills for repairs. This has just simply got to be done. But that's the bad news. The good news is that we think that if we continue to do these kinds of careful improvements and careful maintenance components, that we're going to be able to stay in these buildings indefinitely. Not forever, but indefinitely. And so we do not believe that we need any new capacity in this town. So this is just in summary what the proposed staffing would be, that there would be 2 new elementary music teachers, There would be a proposal to have an elementary teacher at LEAT, because there is an enrollment bubble at LEAT. I think it's in the 3rd grade now, and it's just the way it goes. A lot of people put children into the LEAT district 3 years ago, and so there are some big classes at the 3rd grade in LEAT. However, there's some smaller classes at some of the other elementary schools, and once we see the enrollment numbers, we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to just shift an elementary teacher over to LEAT, so we won't have to add another elementary teacher. The proposal also includes to hire a half-time paraprofessional at Cox for office help. That's the only elementary school that doesn't have that kind of office support, and we think that it's needed. So, and there would be no increases in custodians and no increases in administrative FTEs. Now, this is the part that I usually do, if you recall. This is the part where I try to answer the question, what is it that you're getting from public education in Guilford? Well, the Connecticut State Department of Education just released their Next Generation Accountability Report for 2016 and 2017. And they measure these items. It's not all test scores. It's largely test scores, but it's things like improvement in test scores, growth, chronic absenteeism, participation rates, graduation rates, post-secondary education rates, physical fitness, arts access, and so forth. So this is something that we think is on the one hand, I don't want to overemphasize this report, because the differences between some of the top schools are really very, very small, but it's a snapshot. It's a snapshot, and it's valid data, and we're comfortable with what it's trying to measure is a much more holistic, a much more global way of analyzing how a school district is going. So, if we were, this is, and this has a link to where it is. If we were, these are rankings in statewide, in terms of the way, or the results of the scores statewide in terms of how districts are doing on the state assessments. If our performance as a school district was based solely on demographics, this is the page we would be on. We were about the 24th school district, maybe the 26th school district in the state, demographically, in terms of our wealth, our per capita income, and so forth, put together. But we're not on this page. Let's go to the next page. We're not on that page either. Now, those are some good school districts. Avon, Glastonbury, very good districts. Let's see if we're on the next page. Not on the next page. Ridgefield, Weston, Westport? What? Westport is an outstanding school district. Let's see if we're on the next page. Don't see us yet. Simsbury, Fairfield, Brookfield. Maybe there's one more page. There we are. 4th in the state of Connecticut, behind New Canaan, Greenwich, and Darien. I would be inclined to say not bad, but in fact it's really good. That is at a per student cost of more than $3,000 less than the closest district, and about the same as Farmington, which is just behind us. This is outstanding. There's no way to put it other than to say it's outstanding. This is valid data. This means that what we're doing in Guilford is being done right. And that's partly the leadership of Dr. Freeman and Mr. Bowden and Dr. Keene. It's partly the financial office. It's partly the teachers and the staff, obviously, and it's partly the students and the parents. But these are results that I don't think that anybody necessarily would have anticipated in the not too distant past. We have a right to be very proud of these numbers. So let's talk a little bit about the cost. The municipal fiscal indicators that were just released by the state of Connecticut talk about things like tax burdens and some other data. So let's look at a couple of the items. We are the 49th most populous town in the state. Interestingly, our per capita income is moving up from the year before. We are 22nd now in the state, up from 26th, and our median household income is 38th. Unemployment, very low. Our equalized mill rate, very low and going down. Our adjusted tax levy per capita is only 32nd in the state, notwithstanding the fact that we're 22nd in per capita income, and our equalized net grand list per capita is 35th. So, what about this? Net current expenditures per pupil, we are 78th in the state of Connecticut, 73rd the year before. So we are getting better value, better results for less per student than the year before. Our requested increase is less than the rate of inflation, which is anticipated to be something slightly over 2% in the next year. Other towns are looking for, and obviously the numbers are early, but there are other towns that are looking for increases substantially in excess of what we are looking for. And then I'm just going to mention, again, we talked a little bit about this last year, home values have a very high degree of relation to the quality of the schools. Average expenditure per pupil is positively correlated with housing price, and this has been found in study after study. And there is some data now from the state of Connecticut that indicates that our median housing house value in Guilford is 24th in the state of Connecticut. That's notwithstanding all of those Fairfield County towns. Now, we're behind a lot of those Fairfield County towns, but considering that as far away as we are from New York and Stamford, having the 24th highest property value, median house value in the state of Connecticut is, again, something I think that we can be proud of, and I think that is reflected in part by what is happening in the schools. Obviously public safety, obviously parks as well, but the schools, I think it's undeniable, have an impact. And this is, again, just the same kind of data that shows that there is a return on investment that we get from the school budget. I think if Dr. Freeman were here, he would tell you that we are one of the most successful and most recognized school systems in the state based on outside evaluations, based on standardized test scores, based on college placements, state accountability measures, arts, athletic. Guilford Public Schools are doing a good job. And they're doing a good job with the money that we've been appropriated by the taxpayers and the voters of the town of Guilford, and with the support of this board and the Board of Selectmen. We are pleased to be able to present this budget to you, and we'll be asking anybody who would like more information to just go to these pages on our website, and we can try to provide any information that people would like to have. Obviously, if people have any questions, they can email me or email Dr. Freeman, and we can try to respond appropriately. So that, Mr. Chairman, is our presentation, and one that I'm very, very proud to make.
Sounded it.
Yeah.
Sounded like you were very proud. And you did a fine job filling in for Dr. Freeman. So, and Jason, thank you for. I know you wanted to be up here too, but you're doing the technology, so thank you. The only thing I really want to add is the Board of Ed and the school system started crafting this budget when?
October.
September.
October from the board's point of view.
Yeah, so September from the
Right.
business office sending out.
Right,
to
and then the Board of Ed went into the workshops and
Yes.
started, yeah. And the only thing I wanted to add is, and I think we add this every single year, the Board of Finance has not been, this is not our first look at this budget. We've had our budget books, we've been looking at it, we've been meeting, the last couple of Board of Finance meetings we've met prior to get an understanding of where these numbers were going. So none of this is a surprise. In fact, I think a good portion of us are pleased at where it is right now, in terms of, not just the superintendent's starting point, but where the Board of Ed has brought it to. Obviously, there'll be more discussions, and there'll be more, there'll be public forum and presentation. Again, I know that this presentation happens on the Board of Ed and Board of on the town side, again, at the first meeting, the public hearing of the budget. So I just want to thank you for the presentation. I know that this is typically not necessarily the forum that we would ask, grill you on the budget, but if there's any, what I would entertain is if there's any questions that the Board of Finance members have regarding anything that maybe they want to see prior to sometimes we ask questions at the public hearing, and then you have 2 days to scramble and try to get some of that information together. So if there's anything, that we've all been thinking about of information that we may want, that'll give you a little bit more time to either put that into your presentation or discuss at the public hearing, I would certainly entertain that if anyone had anything.
And I should say some members of the board have already sent questions or thoughts, and I will certainly do our best to be able to respond to those. And appreciate the opportunity to actually research some of the questions.
Right. Yes, and yes, I know some questions have been flowing, and there's whether they got answered tonight or whether they will get answered over the meetings in March. That will happen. So. Ken, I know you just mentioned something about the bonding.
Yeah, the bonding proposal. Are you going to be sending us a package of this? Or is this it?
Well, I don't know what you have.
That's it.
Well, the numbers I know.
Something that you gave us.
The numbers were the numbers were discussed in terms of the Baldwin, which we heard about already. The Baldwin
and Jones.
And the Jones.
Correct.
It's
just
$3.7 million.
Correct.
That will be the extent of the bonding proposal that you're submitting to us.
Dr. Freeman proposed an additional set of bonding in other words, I know there's been some thought that maybe we should try to do 2 years worth of bonding every year so we could have a year on and a year off in terms of doing any bonding. I think that the board felt that given that we still are not at the peak of the debt service, that we should just hold off on the second year of that, which I think is reasonable.
Right. One of the points that Dr. Freeman raised, and we raised it at our second meeting with you, was about the possibility, and this is looking down the road, the possibility of redistricting the middle schools.
Well,
you have a task force at work on that right now, do you? Or?
Correct. That really relates to the start time issue, although it actually...
The start time?
Well, it actually, as I think about it, it's really much, much broader than the start time. One of the things that we are trying to look at as a district is to not try to consider issues like start time, like transitions separately. In other words, they need to be all considered. They're all part... What are we trying to do? What are we trying to drive toward? We're trying to drive toward removing anxiety and stress on children. That's one issue, certainly. One way that we can try to drive toward that, we can try to further that, is by doing things like adopting the new homework policy that we did last year, that is trying to even out some of the peaks and valleys of homework. But also, what's the point of what, we've talked a lot in this community about start times. But what's the point? What is it that we're trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve a healthier life for our children, right? Well, that's not the only way to do it. That is a way to do it, and it's part of a solution, pretty clearly, but it's not the whole solution. Other things may be like the homework policy. It may be like reducing transitions. When you're a sixth grader, well, let's say you're a fourth grader in Guilford, you're going to change schools. For the next 5 years, you're going to change every 2 years until you get to the high school. In other words, you're 2 years at Baldwin, 2 years at Adams. So you're in a transition every other year. Right. Most of the professionals will tell you that's not really a great way to do it. You were from a purely stress, anxiety, avoiding transitions point of view, you're better off staying in a building for 4 years. So the thought is that one thing to look at is to make Baldwin a 5-8 school fed by Lakes and Jones, and Adams a 5-8 school fed by Cox and Lee. Maybe with some exceptions, but something like that. This is not a done deal, but it is something that would allow us to reduce transitions, and which we think is good for students. And it also would allow us actually to start high school later, because one of the big problems that we have in the start time issue is that middle bus run where children are picked up, say, in Sachem's Head, and they're dropped. The one set is dropped at Adams, and then that same bus goes up to Baldwin before it comes back down to Sachem's Head again to get elementary kids for Cox. And if you want to look at it the other way, they go up to Bluffview to pick up kids, and they get to go to Baldwin and then Adams. That's a long time on a bus. Nobody, if you were designing a district, nobody would have a single bus run for 2 middle schools that far apart in a town this big. You just wouldn't do it. So we think that if we did go, then there are a lot of issues with it, and change is not easy, and there are going to be some people that don't think this is a good idea, and I understand that. We all do. And no decisions have been made. But if it allows us to start high school later, if it allows us to get kids off of buses 20 minutes a day, if it allows us to reduce transitions, then maybe it's something that makes sense. It's something that we're going to look at as a package. You know, Dr. Moore managed to retire from the Board of Education, and within minutes, if not hours, he agreed to chair the task force on the whole start time issue. And that is one thing that they're looking at. Whether it's going to be something that we implement, I don't know, but it is certainly something that we're going to look very, very closely at.
I would only add to that that model of 2 middle schools, or having it in the 5, 6, 7, 8 and split geographically, is not new to this town.
No.
Some of us in this room who went to school here, it wasn't 5 through 8, but it was 6 through 8, and that was the model I went under. And I was waiting for everyone else to chime up. That's what I did. That's what I did. And Jones and Lakes went to Baldwin.
I did it actually. It was 5 through 8. It was not here.
Okay. Yeah. So this is not a new concept, and I think many understand that. But I think the newer parents and newer people of town think, if they're not familiar with that, Guilford was that way at one point, and there were reasons why it switched to the way it is now, and could be reasons why it switches back. But regardless, it's going to be a due diligence
Correct.
Study that's going to figure this all out. So
Correct.
That's great.
Thank you.
Do we have time for a couple of questions about the budget?
Sure.
All right. So just want to clarify, I had seen in the preliminary budget that you were considering hiring 1.5 FTEs for the custodial area. Is that no longer going to be?
That was on last year's budget. I think the page that you were reading on in the budget was the page had of last year's. Well, the page in this year's budget has that 1.5 that were part of last year's budget, but they just hadn't been assigned to the high school yet. So there's no custodial increase.
Okay, so
in this
that's
budget.
not applicable to this year?
Yeah, it was done last year. We hired 3 half-time custodians, and sounds like it's working out.
Okay, and then will you still be planning on hiring a recess coordinator at Adams?
That is part of the proposal.
Okay. I touched a little bit on the music teachers, and I was kind of wondering, how many music teachers we have now. I think you said we have 1/2 music teacher at each elementary school?
No, half. There's 2 for just elementary.
I think you said half an FTE at elementary?
Correct. There are 2 for 4 schools.
Okay. And
so they split their time between them.
For Baldwin and for
they have full-time
Adams,
teachers.
It's bigger.
Yeah,
okay.
We're not proposing making any changes at the music program at Adams or Baldwin, and nor would I, given how successful those programs are.
Okay, so the 2 additional ones would be for the elementary school.
Correct.
There was also a note about possibly increases in world language teachers. Is that going to be something that was left over from last year again, or
it's not in this budget?
Okay.
It's actually reduced in last year's budget.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, just checking over some of the pages I was looking at. And then there's a question about the pension funding. Do we know how short we are of fully financing the pension?
Yeah, we do. Within the Board of Ed's pension, most of our, for better or for worse, most of our pension is under the umbrella of the state of Connecticut. The teacher pensions are all under the state of Connecticut. The administrator pensions are all under the state of Connecticut. The only ones that are under our umbrella are some of the non-certified staff. We are about 81% funded according to the actuaries, and we have to fund an additional, I'm going to call it over the next 13 years, approximately $4 million. I don't have the exact numbers in front.
About $3 million.
Okay.
$3 million. Okay.
It's 2.9.
I was sort of leaning towards the annual contribution and where we're at now. And
actuarial determined contribution is
Yeah.
just over $900,000.
Okay.
The normal cost of the plan is just over $400,000.
So anything over 400 is going to go toward funding the deficit, the unfunded portion of the pension plan. So we're doing that. We are going to talk, I think, with the first selectman and the board of selectmen about whether we were talking a little earlier about the medical insurance surplus. That is taxpayer money, and we might as well use it in a responsible way. And one thing we may want to consider is moving some money from that into both town pension plans and the Board of Education's. But that's something that obviously we only do collaboratively and after discussions.
Okay. And then, I see like a little bit of opportunity or flexibility in the site improvements line. And I'm wondering, since we got our preliminary budget, has there been any changes to the site improvements line? Did you forego any projects or phase them into 2 phases or 2 years? Or
Well, only the bonding that I talked about earlier. We had looked at trying to do a larger bond, but decided to split that up and to postpone half of it for a year. The wrinkle with the site improvements line, it's a tempting line to fool with, a tempting line to try to reduce. And I understand that, because that doesn't affect the in classroom instruction. It doesn't affect class sizes. It doesn't affect programs. But the fact is, other than the high school, our building stock here is old. It is. The Baldwin is our second newest school. And it goes back to what, in 71, 69, in that area. We have our other buildings are all in the 60s and the 50s. So there are some substantial needs. And I think, for those of us who remember very vividly the effort to move toward the new high school, one of the complaints was, well, did you really take care of the old high school? Well, there's that in my opinion, that building was past being able to be taken care of, just the way it was designed and constructed. But we think that if we maintain our current other 6 buildings, we do not need to build another school in town. But we can't just not invest in them. They're all old buildings.
Now, there was something particular about the site improvement line that I thought maybe might merit some discussion, or that might have resulted in this next budget being cut back a little. And that is, I just remember the idea being tossed around of taking the contribution we're going to put aside for the turf field replacement and possibly spreading that over 2 years, trying to get 1 more year of use out of the turf field.
I think we're going to. It's not in this budget. Yeah, it's not in this budget at all.
Okay, because that was in prior, that's in the sight line, right?
That was in Dr. Freeman's proposal.
Yep.
The Board of Education voted unanimously to remove it. Because we did get and then we're not just doing this because we thought it's a good idea. We did have a consultant look at the field, and along with Mr. Maynard and Park and Rec and the town side, and they are confident that we can get at least another year out of it. So that's going.
I wonder if you might be as conservative with some of the bonding requests and perhaps consider just doing one major project. I think you know, and I know, that we're forecasted to have our debt servicing increase over the next 3 years, and we're probably approaching like a 10% debt ratio to our budget, debt servicing ratio to our budget. This kind of puts us from a low perspective for rating agencies to a moderate, which is not monstrously terrible, but it would definitely be more conservative, try and stay low and try and keep our debt servicing below 10.
If I could just maybe address this one, if you don't mind. We've been talking about the repairs that are going on in those 2 systems and the priority of those. To put, which one do you push? Do you push Baldwin or you push Jones when they're both as old? And we have got, as Chairman Bloss mentioned, we've got a transmission that I will tell you, if that system goes down, we're going to be spending a heck of a lot more to repair it out of capital than we're going to be able to do in an emergency repair. That's just my opinion based on what I know and my background. But
it's something we can talk about, certainly. But
it's something that could be, but I think it would be detrimental, and it'd be a very poor non-investment in our schools to do that.
It would be extraordinarily risky.
It would be.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask that we move along, because it's well past 9 o'clock and we still have the town side.
We have the town, yes.
So go on.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You want to get that?
Okay, we have
Is there a PowerPoint for the town? Because we'll move, so
Yeah,
I'm not hiding.
we'll move over here.
Not
I think there
hiding.
may be.
yeah, there is.
I think Karen is there to do
So
it.
we'll go over here.
So let me just inform the audience that we're going on to item number 7, receive the proposed town budget for fiscal year 18-19. There will be a PowerPoint, so that's being set up right now. There's a little transition going on here. Thank you.
I always have a problem with Bill's numbers when he's saying fourth. We're fourth in what? We're fourth. The ladies have this?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, there they are.
Yep. They moved so they can see it. So familiar face at this table anyway.
Yes, thank you for welcoming
Welcome,
me back,
First
and I hope
Selectman
it is a
Howard.
welcome.
It is. Welcome back.
It's interesting to be on the other side of the table, so to speak.
I share that thought.
And please remind me, trying not to always follow a guy who can speak as well as Chairman Bloss, and particularly when he has good news to talk about. It's always tough to follow that act. And I just compliment the Board of Education on bringing in a very strong budget. On behalf of the entire Board of Selectmen, 4 of us here this evening, there was one conflict, it is my pleasure to submit the Board of Selectmen's budget for the fiscal year beginning on July 1, 2018, ending on June 30, 2019. The proposed budget includes the town operating capital budget and the debt service budget as well. We believe this budget successfully balances our objectives of providing the necessary resources for essential town services and programs to protect the health and safety of our citizens, maintain capital assets and infrastructure, and improve the quality of life while maintaining fiscal responsibility and property tax stability. This budget is being forwarded to you for the first time in many years with a unanimous vote of the Board of Selectmen. And I think that's an important distinction. A unanimous vote, a bipartisan unanimous vote, has delivered this budget to you. The total 2018-19 Board of Selectmen's proposed budget is $38,213,632, which combines both the operating and capital and debt service. And we'll talk a little bit about how we might want to look at what is specifically the Board of Selectmen's budget. We had those conversations from the other side of the table as well. So Karen has, if you would go back one, please. In this page, one of the things that I think may not be as apparent to everybody is the complexity of providing the variety of services that this community has come to expect. This community has come to rely on it. Public safety and protection is, in many people's minds, the #1 reason for the establishment of organized government. And I'm proud to say we have the finest police and fire services that one could expect to have. No clear evidence of that was the unfortunate or the tragic death of one of our young members of our community. I have received nothing but the highest compliments about the performance of our police and our fire and EMS services. And I also, this is probably a good time, Youth and Family Services, Park and Recreation, the engineering, the town property management team, everyone pulled together in that time of crisis and just showed what kind of community Guilford is. So I want to take the opportunity to thank them. Obviously, we have to maintain a significant amount of infrastructure in this community. You've just heard what a wonderful job we do educating our children. The ranking of that ranking is unbelievable, particularly in light of the cost per pupil. Literally, 20% less than those districts just above us. Economic development and tourism is a tough task in this community. We pretty much know that we don't have an awful lot of developable land, and we continue to work to try to attract new businesses to this community that fit in with the character and the quality of life in this community, as well as maintain and protect those businesses that are in town so they don't leave to go elsewhere. There are other town services, the Elderly Tax Relief Program, Land Use Departments, Town Hall South. I mentioned Youth and Family Services a minute ago. The senior services that we offer through Park and Rec, unparalleled on the shoreline and maybe throughout the state. Little known, small little department, social services, impacts many, many lives in this community. And then, of course, there are quality of life things, our libraries, and most recently handed over to Rob McGlone from current Board of Selectmen member Sandy Ruoff, who built a terrific library and one that we're all proud of. I want to talk a little bit where your tax dollars go and what we get. The fire department last year responded to 3,861 calls. Police department, almost 12,000 calls. The Guilford Free Library circulated 250,000 items. 36,000 people participated in programs or rented study rooms at the library. 48 square miles of roads, I think, is the second largest landmass of a community in the state of Connecticut. Requires significant investment in equipment to make sure we can maintain those. Parks and Recreation served over 8,000 participants in over 600 classes. And by the way, they also manage 9 beaches or parks. And they also participate in snow clearing throughout the year. They have responsibility for clearing the town's sidewalks. Social services I mentioned a minute ago. This, in the past year, assisted almost 660 households, and those are some of the households that need that we don't often hear about in communities like Guilford, that actually need assistance, and they help. Social services helps them through the process of identifying and taking advantage of many state programs that are available to low-income housing for low-income residents. The health department, Youth and Family Services, 1,671 clinical appointments. Start dividing that by the number of work days in the course of a year, and you can start to figure out that that's a busy place. The health department conducted 638 inspections. The assessor manages 6 tax assistance programs and over 10,000 real estate accounts. In the town clerk's office alone, and I know there are at least one member of this board who has a frequent flyer in that office, recorded almost 3,700 deeds, issued close to 500 marriage, birth, and death certificates. So those are some of the things that we may not always be aware are going on a day-to-day basis throughout our community. As we went to craft this budget, we were especially concerned with maintaining the high level of services despite continued reductions in state funding. You will see in this budget that we have projected estimated revenues, and we did not incorporate the governor's suggested cuts over and above what had been implemented during the current budget season. Those are proposals, much like the proposals he put out a year ago. I think you probably recall a year ago he suggested we should be writing the state a check for $250,000. So his numbers, in my estimation, are highly unlikely to get anywhere near implementation, particularly since the legislature passed a biennial budget last year. We're also concerned about maintaining the senior tax freeze program at current levels. We wanted to continue to our investments in maintaining our infrastructure and our roads. We also wanted to continue to provide essential public and safety protection services, which included in this budget is full-year funding for the additional police officer that was approved last year, and the 8 new firefighters, a substantial portion of which is being covered by the SAFER grant for the first couple of years. We also have maintained the commitment of the previous Board of Selectmen to fund pension liabilities at actuarial recommended levels, and you'll see the impact of that a little bit later. We've continued our investment in ecological improvements to Lake Quantipoc. That's an asset that this community has come to love and appreciate, and we continue to protect the continued viability of that facility. We maintain capital project funding within the operating budget. Budget, this is a budget without reliance on revenues from fund balance. And I think Bill mentioned that there is some discussion for us to start to talk about utilizing some of our excess fund balance, either in the health account or the unassigned fund balance itself, to start to put some monies aside for projects like bringing the Board of Education's funded ratio up. We've also talked, I think you guys have heard me talk about this before, we need to make some assessments and investments in technology in certain parts on the town side. And I would also like to see us invest some of that money in a capital fund, start to build a capital fund over time so that we don't necessarily have to go to our operating budgets every year. I think there's been a discussion for years about funding a capital line item for engineering studies as we prepare projects to go to the public. One last one that I do want to talk about, shameless self-promotion here. We are getting ready to roll out a task force. We're calling it the Guilford Safe Streets Mobility Task Force, which is designed to take a look at the traffic and pedestrian safety concerns. In large measure, it is a response to I want to say the divisive nature of what happened in this community with the Shoreline Greenway Trail, the Nut Plains pathway, and more recently the petitions for sidewalks. This is to take a comprehensive look at what we are doing to ensure the most effective pedestrian safety and access to centers of culture in our community. And I intend to ask this board to move funds into that project as well. So that's where we'll use some of those excess funds. This operating budget, as I said, is we are asking for a total of $38,213,632, which is a 4.5% overall increase. However, let's go back to bifurcating the major components here. The town operating budget in and of itself, we are looking for $1,057,979, or a 3.69% increase. Total debt service, which we've all come to understand and accept as a result of the significant investment we made in this community for that beautiful high school, is driving some significant cost, or 7.84%. You roll the two together, and it comes out to about 4.6%. And again, I think the term Board of Selectmen's budget is not necessarily fair because the total debt service breakout is along the following lines. The Guilford High School the debt retirement itself accounts for 49.1%. The town projects 32%, and school improvements 18%. I have always looked at this as a shared line item, a shared budget line item, because it goes to both sides of the budget. Here's a summary of Board of Selectmen reductions to what was originally submitted to us. The department budgets, as you can see, the Board of Selectmen collectively eliminated almost $500,000 worth of operating costs out of those budgets, over $700,000 out of the capital budget, $250,000 out of the employee benefits line item, for a total reduction from the budgets as submitted to the board of nearly $1.454 million. So that's how it lays out in terms of where we started. I believe most of you were at the Board of Selectmen workshop meetings, saw the original presentations, and since that time, I believe we held, 4 or 5 Board of Selectmen workshops to get the number down to that. I want you to take a look at the increases by major category of town budget. This is somewhat similar to a slide that you saw on the Board of Education proposal. The increases in this budget are related to salaries and employee benefits. Total salaries change is 4.14% increase. That number would be 3.05% if we were talking only about the current staffing levels. What drives it to 4.14 is the second half of funding for the police officer who was hired in January, and the town's contribution for the 8 firefighters. So again, that number would have been 3.05, but the reality is it is 4.14. Employee benefits are going up dramatically, 10.51%, driving that total new dollar request to $1.345 million. And I think if we recall, we are only asking for $1,057,000 in this budget. So what that suggests is that all our other operating expenses are dropping by about $240,000. Capital accounts, unfortunately, the board decided, even though we wanted to continue to grow capital, it's been a stated objective of the Board of Selectmen for a number of years, we knew we had to make some decisions, and we took out about 5% out of the capital budget. Here's the detail that I mentioned, so we can probably flip through that. This is the difference between current salaries and the new salaries as a result of the police and firefighters. A little more detail in employee benefits. The pension plan contributions, as you can see, $419,000 in new money, or nearly 17.5% increase. And that is a result of some recalculations related to the police pensions that we are being asked to make this kind of increase. Medical benefits. This is a reasoned decision. We're cutting it pretty close to the bone in terms of increases at $21,000 or $22,000. We're doing this for a couple of reasons. A couple of years ago, when the Board of Education went to the HSA account, which we now have, let's see, both the Guilford Supervisors Union and GEA, the contract which was signed a week or so ago, now incorporate HSA accounts. And we saw a dramatic drop in the Board of Education's healthcare funding levels when that happened. I want to take a quick moment, and Jonathan, you did talk about the ISL stop loss. This budget does include the ISL premiums. The decision that we arrived at was one based on, over time, we have been careful not to react to a one-year experience. These types of items are best evaluated with a rolling 3 to 5 year average. And at this point, the numbers are dramatically in our favor in terms of what we've saved with the stop loss. And again, it's tempting to say we got burned this year, let's drop it. But as we've all seen over the years, the volatility in healthcare, it only takes, I hate to say something like this, it only takes 3 or 4 serious cancer patients out of our entire employee base to drive that number somewhere. And retirement sick leave, we are actually reducing that because of better estimates of the usage. In the capital budget, we're asking for $1,008,000. It's down from last year, which we were at $1,080,000. And again, there was some angst. There's been a push for a number of years to continue to grow that, to diminish reliance on bond funding for projects. And you will be getting the data, the backup sheets, and show what items have been reduced from the original proposal that you saw, which I think was $1.7 million. The board has dropped out over $700,000. Now, dropped out is not really the right word. What we're doing, I hate to say it, in many cases, is kicking the can down the road. We are moving things off. Public Works had requested 3 vehicles. 2 vehicles this year and 1 next year. The Board of Selectmen is recommending 1 this year, 1 next year, and the 1 next year pushed off to the following year. So those needs are still there. We're just moving them out. And Jonathan, you've occasionally said, can we do that kind of thing? And in many cases, we have done that with the items in the capital budget. And again, this is, to me, is a little bit disappointing. We've seen a nice trend line since 2012. We had a little dip in 2017. For those whose memories are strong, that was the year we went to 3 budget referendums, and that's why that number dropped that year. Again, I think it's been a stated goal of the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen to build capital project funding in the operating budget to a point that it's a sustainable point. And at this point, it looks like we're sort of stuck at about $1 million. And the reverse effect here is that continues to drop. The Board of Selectmen's request for bonded capital projects. As you're aware, the town has been on a program of bonding every 2 years. And so this year is the odd year, so we will not be asking for anything under capital bonding. This is the revenue side of the equation. At this point, we are forecasting local revenues of $2,846,000, $86,629, or a $106,759 increase. And that is coming from several areas: interest income, town clerk's office, and I think we also have another year of projections where we're going to be recouping more prior year's taxes. The state is another story. What we have done for purposes of assumption is we took the legislature's biennium budget that was passed in November and the aid to Guilford. From that, we deducted the governor's holdback cuts that he implemented 2 weeks after that budget went into effect. So the baseline we're using is what the legislature approved and signed into law, and the governor's rescissions or cuts or holdbacks, whatever you want to call them, which he was entitled to make as a result of the legislation that authorized the budget. So now there's an argument to be made that he in the second year he may change the distribution of that. But at this point, I'm not willing to put a stake in the ground as to where the governor would go. Would he go? I guess I take that back. I am putting a stake in the ground. I'm putting a stake in the ground the same place that he put it in late November. And I think for planning purposes, that's about the best we can do. I mentioned earlier that the governor has recently proposed additional cuts, which the legislature would have to approve. I spent last Wednesday up at opening day up at the legislature as a guest of Sean Scanlon and Vinnie Candeloro from North Branford, and I talked to legislators, and not one of them indicated that they thought the governor's proposal had any chance of being enacted into law. I also had the opportunity to speak with the deputy majority leader of the House, and he said exactly the same thing. So what we have done, again, is used the baseline that we think is most reasonable at this point, and that would result in what you see down here, which is roughly $215,000 to $220,000 decrease from where we are today. Components of debt service, I had jumped ahead, I think, so this is probably something we can slide right over. And just in closing, the Board of Selectmen reduced the department budget request by over $1 million, about down to $1 million. Current staffing increases are at 3.5% for salary, 4.14 with the inclusion of the 8 new firefighters. There are no bond authorization requests. We maintain capital funding levels consistent with Board of Selectmen targeted levels, and we're doing this in the face of diminishing reliance on state funding. thank you for indulging me with this presentation, and I anticipate that there will be questions at the public hearing. But before I move on, I do want to thank the staff, the Town Hall staff, the Finance Office, Mary Jane, her staff, the Selectmen staff, Karen and Tracy, for all their assistance in helping pull these presentations together. But more importantly, the Board of Selectmen for emerging as a relatively new board, as a board that's willing to work together and compromise and deliver what I think is a solid work product and a solid budget. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I would only add the same thing I added for the Board of Education presentation, is that I know you've also been crafting your budgets. Your town departments have been at it, both not just department heads, but boards, commissions. They've been all working at their numbers. We were at the workshops. I do think that all of us at some point or time were at a good portion, a majority of the workshops. And we asked questions and listened to the presentations. And of course, the Board of Selectmen, as we just heard, had a lot of work to do, 4 meetings to get to where you are.
Maybe we just couldn't make a decision.
Well, and I think it goes to the level of effort and what you were trying to do to bring in something that definitely was reasonable. The only thing I'm wondering, and there's been some discussion about grand lists. I don't know if there's anything that we should mention about grand list. I know the Board of Selectmen discussed it. I know it's going to be on the minds of a lot of people. I know it's already spreading a little bit in the circles, as we say, of social media. But about the grand list, would you be willing to talk a little bit about that?
I would. I believe that you received, and I'm trusting the full board received the assessor's report. I don't know whether you have or not, but I believe you have a